Tell you what, here we go. We're going to finish. We have this week and next week, and we are done with Joesph. No, we're not done with it. We'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about the New Testament Joesph after that. We're coming into his time of the year. And so, but I've enjoyed looking at this life of a man in the Old Testament and watching him grow. And watching him grow from basically being a young adult to where now we're going to look at him when he's about 30 years old and he's entering adulthood. And how God is incrementally, oh my goodness, he's gradually, is that better? I can say what I was practicing. But he's gradually brought him along, and he's increased his responsibilities through hardship and through different places in his life. So go with me to the book of Genesis, chapter 41. We have a lot to cover. Some I'm going to read, some I'm going to paraphrase and just go on. So just bear with me as we look. This is an amazing snapshot of a man's life in the Old Testament. We're going to see this. And so we're going to read. Let's look at this. Chapter 41, verse 1. Here we go. When 2 full years had passed. Okay, remember, he's in jail. Okay, Joseph's in jail right now. And he's asked the cupbearer that when he gets out, can you please tell the king and somebody who's in the, basically, anybody in authority that can help me, can you tell them that I'm in prison? Will you help me? Well, just like, I don't know how many of you guys have ever done this going, oh yeah, I remember you, I'll do this, and you go, man, that was like 3 weeks ago. And this guy, 2 years later, he still hasn't told the king about Joesph. Anyway, when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. When out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. Wasn't the right time to ask for a hamburger, so he went back to sleep. Anyway, verse 5. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. Thank God. In the morning, his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Let's stop there. There was a show a long time ago, and those of us who are a little older remember this. It was called Charles in Charge. I don't know if anybody remembers that show. It was, and that's a time when Scott Baio didn't look like my grandfather, and he was younger, and it was this guy who was kind of in charge of the household, and there was kids, and everybody kind of rotated around him, and he was giving out. That's kind of where we are with Joesph. No matter what situation in life he's been put in charge of that situation. And so now we're at the very cusp of him being put in charge of Egypt. But he comes out and he's using what God has given him. And this is the ability to interpret dreams. And so Joseph's environment at this time. Remember, he was the high son in the beginning. Even though he was the youngest, he was the high son. He was loved more by his dad. And he was also a snitch to his dad. He was the younger one. If you've got, like I said, more than 2 kids, you go for the younger one and they report, and you reward them. And then they report again, and you reward them again. And then they turn into the brat. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Danielle. She's going to get me later. She, hide my glasses or something. She'd hide her book. After he was the high son of his family, in the sense he was the youngest, he goes in as a slave to Potiphar, and he becomes the high servant. Because God was with him. If you remember, he said each time he said that God was with him and blessed him all that he did. And so he was the high servant. Then all of a sudden, Potiphar's wife kind of flipped out on him, and he remained faithful to God and got away, and Potiphar had to throw him in jail. So after a while, he became the high prisoner. He basically ran the prison. And as we talked about, you think about that for a second, that he was so favored by the warden that the warden let him run the prison, basically. He trained the new prisoners, took care of things. That's just, I can't see at one of our Texas prisons the warden going to the prisoner going, hey, you run things. Just an amazing character this guy had. But the Pharaoh here, we can see, was really, this dream had just messed with him enough that he just knew that it was something other than just a normal nightmare. And you know what? I have no dream story this week. I cannot do anything. I cannot beat the purple squirrel and the pink bunny slippers. I just have nothing that my wife had. And I even, hey, you got anything else? And she's like, no, I'm not going to share anything with you ever again. You know, as I told her dream. So we're going to work through this story. We're talking about Joseph's environment that he's in. And so we're going to work through this story a little bit. So we get here in verses 10 through 13, the paraphrase is this. The cupbearer begins to tell Pharaoh about Egypt. So as you want to follow through, you can read that. He begins to talk to them. And it's kind of funny. He says, remember when you sent me to prison? Let's get past that. There's this guy there. You know, he doesn't want to dwell on the fact that Pharaoh was once mad at him. You know, so he's like, okay, yeah, there was this guy there, and you remember the baker, the guy you impaled. Okay, we'll get past that now, too. There was this guy who we both had dreams, and we told it to him, and whatever he said, when he said it, came out exactly as he said. And so, you think about it, Pharaoh, and this is what some people do. Pharaoh went to all mankind. He went to the magicians and the wise men. He went to man first. What can you tell me about dreams? And we know from what Joesph said before, Joesph said the dreams are from God, and only he can tell them. He can interpret them for you. So, trying to get man to interpret something that God has done is futile. And we still do it today. And like I said, on TV and different things, you see people who claim to have PhDs in theology and stuff that don't know Jesus try to tell us what the Bible's doing or what the Bible says. And they really don't have a clue. So we go down here, verse 14. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. I imagine this was both for him and Pharaoh's good. One, if he's been in prison for a couple of years, I don't imagine hygiene was high on the priority list. Right? And we're not just talking shaving here. He probably shaved here as well. Changed his clothes. He came before Pharaoh. He had to make himself presentable. Verse 15. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I love his response. I cannot do it. Can you imagine if the cupbearer was there going, dude, I just told him all about you. I've already upset him once in life, and he forgave me. I don't want to upset him again. So I can imagine the cupbearer being a little nervous at this point. But Joseph said, listen, he goes, I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Continually, Joseph, all throughout his life, he continues to give God the credit for what's going on. Not just credit, he's saying God is doing it. It is not me, it is the Lord. Even when God gives us ability, we need to surely give him the credit and praise for the ability he's given us. Verses 17 through 23. Pharaoh's dreams are explained. And this happens a couple times, so you can read through here if you want. It explains about the cows and the time of plenty and the time of famine. and what you're going to do. And so he goes through this. But in verse 24 it says, then the thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me. One more time, man cannot explain what God has intended. Then Joesph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. I think this is very important that when Joesph was talking to him, he's not saying this is just the future of what's coming. This is what God is about to do. He is about to bring this on us. And so this is a sure thing. This is happening. This isn't something, like I said, this isn't a storm that's coming out of the east. It's just a future. This is what God is about to do on us. On all the land. So we get here from 26 to 39, Joesph explains the dreams and then how to deal with the dreams. He explains, listen, we're going to have to get these people and put them in a place and take out the grain and take excess in. And so he lays out this whole plan that God has provided. Then we get to verse 40. Verse 40 says, you shall be in charge of my palace. And all my people are submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Joesph now, he's coming to a point to where he was, like he said, he was a high son. He came from a shepherd, but he's basically gone from a hole in the ground where they threw him to second in command of one of the strongest nations, if not the strongest nation on the earth. Pharaoh said, listen, no one is greater than I, but you know what? Next to you, it's just me. No one will lift the foot, no one will lift, no one will work, no one will move without your orders. This is, like I said, this is a story. Sometimes we're just, we tell stories before they go to bed and different things. Today we're going over a story of a man's life, and then hopefully I'll have a nice climactic ending for you. Verse 41 through 57 here. And I'm trying to go through them quickly. So Pharaoh said to Joesph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on his finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. See, before this, every time a new climactic time had happened in Joseph's life, it was troublesome. Remember, he was going to be his father sent him out to be a snitch to his brothers and say, go to the fields and tell me if they're actually doing what I told them to do. And then come back and report to me. And he ended up in a cistern where they threw him in it. Then some people came by and they sold him as a slave to them, their own brother. And I thought it was funny that they even said, well, he is our brother, let's not kill him, we'll just sell him. Okay? And then all of a sudden after that, then he sold again to Potiphar. But Potiphar noticed he had the Lord on him and made him in charge of his whole house. And got blessed. Then he got in trouble, ended up in prison. Again, just like I said before, and the prison warden saw that everything he did was God had blessed it. So he put him in charge of the prison. And we talked about that. Maybe Joesph, even though he's at the top, he's saying, can I catch a break? Yeah, maybe can I catch a break a little bit? But now, the tragedy is gone. The triumph is here. And that dream that he had all the way back in the beginning, when he talked to his brothers and his father about that everybody would bow down to him. See, there had to be a progression. Let's read through this. Then Pharaoh told him, we read that 41, go to 43. He had made him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joesph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joesph the name, I said this last night, Zephanath-Paneah, and gave him a daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt, surveying. He's going to look at everything. Verse 46, Joseph was 30 years old. That was it. 30 years old. When he entered the service of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land was plentiful. You ever notice that how when things are going great like that, time seems to fly by? Time just seems to fly by when we're going through that. And I imagine the times that plentiful was going by, and verse 49 said, Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that they stopped keeping records because it was so much food. It was beyond measure. Verse 50, before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it is because God has made me forget all of my trouble and all my father's household. God has a way, as we remain with him, as we remain in his presence, God has a way of healing our past. He has a way of coming to us and bringing forgiveness. The healing part is usually us forgiving. Because of what has been done to us, what has been done to us in our past, and just as a child, if people have said things about us and moved on us, and of course, there's nobody else like Joseph that has a reason to be upset because he really has done nothing wrong, and yet he's went through all the trouble he's been in. The second son, he named Ephraim and said, it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. God has a way of moving on our life, and we remain in him no matter our circumstances. He has a way to make us come out ahead. There are times in our life, where we stood up and we testified and said, we don't know. The bills are this much and our income was this much, but we're able to pay everything.
Amen.
It is. There are times in my life where that has happened. And you go, it doesn't make sense. And the more I try to make sense of it, the more frustrated sometimes I'm getting. And finally God will just go, just accept it.
That's right.
Because if you try to go about it as far as the way man looks at things versus the way I look at things,
Right.
it's not going to make sense to you. Then verse 53, the 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end. I imagine, and we know when those times are in life, when things are going good, and we know exactly, and we can almost call to a point when right here is when things went downhill. And the 7 years of famine began. But I want you to know that this, as we get ready to go through this last part, that because Joseph was faithful. See, it's not the faith by itself wouldn't have worked. He had to actually work and do the things. He actually had to take in the grain. They actually had to do whatever they needed with the cattle. They actually had to make preparations for the time of famine.
That's right.
Because faith without works is what? Do we know that? Dead. When we have faith but we don't want to get up and exercise it, faith just sits there. It does nothing. Faith in that we have a Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who wants to save people, but we never tell anybody about it. Guess what? It stays with us. And those who needed to hear about it don't hear it. When people need to hear about the sustaining grace of God, when they need to hear about His sustenance, when they hear about Him, and we don't tell them about it, they sit in misery. And they sit hopeless. Verse 55. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses. And this is one thing I thought. Joseph not only did all this to save his country, but he also made his king richer. He was able to bless who he worked for, because he followed what God had, and he sold all the grain. And all the people around, he goes to talk about everybody. The famine was everywhere, so people began to come and begin to sell the grain. 57 says, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. Now that we've finished the verses, I want to say this. There's 4 different things. 1, Joseph was in charge of the message to his brothers. Then he grew. God groomed him. God took the circumstances and matured him. And then Joseph was in charge of a household then. He was in charge of everything that Potiphar had. He went from being in charge of a message to in charge of a household. Then things happened. And then Joseph was put in charge of a prison over many, many, many men. It grew. And he was matured and seasoned. And then finally Joseph was put in charge of a nation. I'm saying all that to say this, that the circumstances that we go through, yes, they're terrible. We need to cry out, God, help us. But we also say, God, use this in my life. Allow the tragedy that has happened to me, dear God, as you begin to work and drop me and bring me through it, allow me, dear God, to be a better person afterwards. And as Joseph went through all the torturous things he went through, he got to the point that he was ready to take charge of the nation. And then next week we'll find the final sermon. I'm not going to give it away. No, but in the final part of it, Joseph was able to save his brothers. He could not, I tell you what, as good as Joseph was, he could not have been the Joseph in charge of a message to go to be Joseph in charge of a nation. He would have been ready. God brought him along and used the situations, used the circumstances, sometimes tragedies. I think in my life at different times where I've said, God, why? I remember when I was going to Bible college and all the other men that were there, young men there were to study to go into the pastorate. I remember seeing their fathers move them in. And I didn't have one. And God had to remind me that, you know what? I'm your father. I'll see you through this. And he was able to use and mature me past that. I know that other people that I've talked to who've come through tragedy and said, you know what? I don't know I would have changed anything because I wouldn't be where I am today without what I've gone through. And so I know that there are those of us some of us are at the beginning, where we're kind of Joseph in charge of the message, where we're just kind of going through life. And there's going to be tragedy happening, and I hate it for you, and I don't want it to happen, but I know that this life, there are bad things going to happen. There are tragedies that are going to happen. There are upsetting things that happen to us. And how we handle that, by remaining in God, He just matures us and seasons us, and it allows us to handle, believe it or not, we can handle more. And I know that there are some of us who've gone through some initial tragedies and we've come through that, and you know what? There's other things that are going to happen. And then after that, there's other things that are going to happen. And ultimately, all of us who remain in Jesus, here's what it is. Well, those of us who remain in Him, one day will get the crown of life.
Amen.
And I didn't intend for this to be a heaven sermon, but yet it's the way it is. If we remain in Him, ultimately, when we remain in Him, we're not going to have tragedy to go through anymore.
That's right. Amen.
One day Jesus is going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Amen.
I know you've been through tragedy. I was there with you. I know you went through this. I was there with you.
That's right.
I know you would do this horrible thing. I was there carrying you.
Yes.
And now, guess what? No more tragedy.
Praise
Come on home. Come on home.
That's right.
And so for me, I imagine Joesph getting to the point, and not that he's in heaven, but he, compared to the prison and being a slave and in a hole, he's in a much better place right now. Right? It's like a Pharaoh. So he gave him his ring. He rode in the second chariot behind him. People were saying, make way for Joesph. When they came to Pharaoh to ask for answers, he said, I don't have them. Go to Joesph. And that's a lot because the Pharaoh is considered a god.
That's right.
Joesph walked in such a way that someone who considered himself a god looked at Joesph and said, his God is getting us through this.
Amen.
And so no matter where you are in this cycle of life, at the beginning, in the middle somewhere, towards the end, or at the very end, no matter where we are, remain in Him.
Amen.
It's coming. The end is coming. And the point where Jesus is going to reach us. We've had some tragedy this last year and a half or so in church.
That's right.
But I can't imagine some of them, the ones that we've had, when they closed their eyes here, the next moment they opened up and they had Jesus taking them by the hand,
Amen.
welcoming them into heaven.
Amen.
And the pain was gone. They could walk. They could sing. They can praise Jesus without any limitation.
Amen.
And friends, we need to be able to look at that. And I look at the story of Joseph's life, and it's one from boyhood to maturity, from God bringing him through everything to a time to where he has everything. So as we pray this morning, thank you for your indulgence for me telling you a Sunday school story. Oh, what a story of a life.
Amen.
Pardon me. Let's pray. Precious Father, as we come to you today, I thank you, dear Jesus, for never leaving me. Never. Father, you never wanted harm to come, but you also know we live in a fallen world. And precious God, as tragedy has come, or just downtimes, you make yourself closer and even more real. Father, I pray for us as a church that for those of us who know you, may we reach out to those who are going through tragedy and surround them. At times we look at Joseph's life and it says the Lord was with Joesph. You know what? God, use us to be your hands. Use us to be your feet, to be your ministering tools, dear God, to reach out. And may people know you through our actions. Thank you, dear God, for all that you've done. Thank you for your word and all that it shows us. Again, dear Lord, we think of all the prayer requests today that were at the altar of different places, and we also think of our veterans through Jesus. With all of us. Lord, we ask with our themes, we surrender for you just to work. We expect you to be here in your fullness. And we thank you for it. In your precious, precious, precious name. And God's church said, Amen.